I'm Charles, and at the age of 32, I found myself engulfed in confusion. This all began when I picked up the phone, expecting a simple check-in call from my mom. To my astonishment, she blurted out, "Charles, how have you been? Listen, this might come out of nowhere, but how would you feel about marrying Rose?" I was taken aback, questioning why she would propose such an idea so abruptly following a casual greeting. Her suggestion was so unexpected that I couldn't help but raise my voice in surprise, wondering if perhaps something was amiss with her. Despite my evident shock, my mom calmly proceeded to explain that Rose was struggling to raise her child on her own. She mentioned that Stella, a longtime family friend known for her inquisitive nature, had been assisting Rose and observed her challenges firsthand. Rose, who currently resides 3 hours away due to her job and parental responsibilities, only reunites with us during extended holidays like Thanksgiving. Last Thanksgiving, I genuinely enjoyed spending time with my 6-year-old niece, Clara, which Stella pointed out to my mom, sparking curiosity about Rose's well-being. Stella shared that she saw Rose at the park, looking utterly exhausted as Clara played, a stark contrast to the always cheerful Rose I knew. Rose, my sister-in-law, and I first met during my college days when my brother introduced us. My brother, Frank, who is 6 years older than me, and I have had a neutral relationship, partly due to our age gap and differing interests. While I was heavily involved in baseball, Frank leaned towards reading and crafts, limiting our interactions. However, Frank's academic prowess came in handy, especially during my middle school years, when he offered to help me with my studies, including preparing for entrance exams, a gesture that reflected our brotherly bond despite our distinct paths. I earnestly sought Frank's assistance, urging him to first attempt the problems he set for me. Despite solving them, my solutions were far from satisfactory. Observing my attempts, Frank's demeanor transformed, and he turned into an exceptionally dedicated tutor. Through our joint efforts, I managed to secure admission into the high school of my choice. Frank, who was already in college, was overjoyed at my success. "That's fantastic, Charles. You really put in the effort," he exclaimed. I felt a mix of embarrassment and joy, particularly moved by the image of Frank's beaming face and tousled hair, a memory that has stayed with me. From that point forward, our conversations grew more frequent, and I began to see Frank not just as my brother but as a mentor and role model, despite his occasional stubbornness. By the time I was in my second year of college and Frank was 26, he wanted to introduce me to someone special. His voice, tinged with a shy excitement over the phone, hinted at something more. "Indeed, a girlfriend? That's incredible, I'm eager to meet her," I responded enthusiastically to his news. Frank's admission that he intended to marry her only heightened my anticipation. Known for his intellectual charm, Frank had always been modest about his appeal to others. The prospect of meeting the woman he chose was thrilling, especially with marriage in mind. "We're planning to visit during New Year's. Will you be there?" Frank inquired. My affirmative response, highlighting my availability due to a break from my part-time job, marked the beginning of our preparations. The anticipation led my family and me to thoroughly clean the house and undertake significant preparations. When the day arrived and Frank announced they were close, the excitement was palpable. I volunteered to greet them at the door. "Charles, it's been a while. How are Mom and Dad?" Frank inquired upon arrival. Behind him stood Rose, his prospective bride, who greeted us with politeness and a hint of nervousness. Her fair complexion, large eyes, and demure demeanor immediately endeared her to us, leaving a lasting positive impression. I found her undeniably charming, and it was clear my parents shared this sentiment. "Isn't she just delightful?" my father exclaimed, clearly smitten with Rose, who was poised to become part of our family. It struck me then that the usual tension between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law might be absent in our home, a thought that was comforting as I observed my parents' warm reception of her. "She's quite the catch," my father commented, encouraging us to move from the doorway into the house, his face alight with a joy I seldom saw. He had once confessed, somewhat wistfully after a few drinks, his regret at not having a daughter, despite the joy of raising 2 sons. "I'm excited for the day you both find partners," he had said, a statement that, at the time, I met with a resigned smile due to my recent breakup. Dad encouraged, "Let's head inside," and Rose, "Try to relax. I assure you, our family is quite welcoming." His glance towards Rose was filled with an assurance that seemed especially meant for her, highlighting Frank's usual kindness but with a tenderness seemingly reserved for her alone. It was evident she had made an excellent choice in Frank. As we awkwardly introduced ourselves, the atmosphere eased over a meal lovingly prepared by my mother, featuring many of Frank's favorites. The evening, spent flipping through photo albums and sharing stories, remains a cherished memory. "Thank you for a wonderful day and for welcoming Rose," I expressed. "She's truly remarkable. Look after her," to which Frank confidently replied, "Absolutely," with Rose offering a timid yet genuinely happy smile. That day marked the end of a joyous gathering, setting the stage for their smoothly progressing relationship, which led to a joyful wedding a year later. "Charles, I'm thrilled to officially be part of your family," Rose shared on their wedding day. "Can I start calling you sis?" I proposed, to which she warmly agreed, joking about the oddity if I suddenly referred to her as Big Sister. "Let's promise to still share a drink together, even when we're old," I suggested, sealing our bond with a fist bump as we watched their vows of eternal love. I was moved to tears by the ceremony, admittedly more than just a few. 4 years into their marriage, Frank hinted at important news and requested a visit. I was at work when I heard and felt a sense of foreboding upon returning home, noticing my usually upbeat mother's unusual somberness. "What's wrong, Mom?" "You seem down," I inquired, puzzled by her uncharacteristic mood. Her demeanor hinted at something amiss, a rare shadow over her typically optimistic spirit. Upon inquiring, my mother confessed her concerns. Frank's voice was so devoid of its usual vitality over the phone, it was unnervingly different, she admitted. I could only offer a nod in response, unable to fathom a dispirited Frank, known for his tranquility but not for an absence of vigor. Hoping for clarity with their imminent visit, I offered reassurance, perhaps he's merely exhausted from work. "We'll have a better understanding once they're here." This seemed to alleviate her worries somewhat. Indeed, fretting prematurely serves no purpose. "They're due to arrive this Saturday, so let's prepare some heartwarming dishes to lift their spirits," she decided, embarking on her usual cleaning routine, which brought me a sense of comfort. The anticipation of reuniting with Frank was high until the moment they reached our doorstep, shortly after informing us of their nearing arrival. Our initial smiles were suspended in time as Frank appeared before us, noticeably thinner than before, a change we hadn't anticipated given his already lean frame. "Hey, it's been a while." "Shocked?" "I've lost quite a bit of weight," he remarked with a smile, though it carried an underlying fatigue. Rose, looking on with concern, suggested they head inside for some rest. As we settled in the living room, an awkward silence enveloped us until my mother served tea. Frank finally broke the silence, apologizing for the startling weight loss, noting how such a drastic change saps one's energy. My mother's expression turned to one of deep worry as she inquired, "Was it a heat stroke?" But what followed was unimaginable. "No, it's cancer, terminal." "I've been given a year," Frank disclosed with a nonchalance that belied the gravity of his condition, treating it as though it were a mundane detail of daily life. The news petrified us, and time seemed to stand still until Rose's sniffles snapped us back to reality. After gathering the courage to speak, which arguably should have been my parents' role, I broached the silence with a question that mirrored our collective disbelief. "Terminal? As in, there's absolutely no chance? No treatments could make a difference?" Frank's response was dishearteningly serene. Despite seeking multiple opinions, the consensus remained unchanged. The fatigue from this exhaustive process was evident. Beside him, Rose wept quietly. "It's unfathomable. Just as you've laid the foundations for your home, we're thriving in your careers. Why must this happen to you?" My voice wavered as I fought to maintain composure, my emotions threatening to surface. The irony was cruel. Frank and Rose had recently embarked on a new chapter full of promise, only for it to be overshadowed by such tragic news. The revelation that Frank's time was limited profoundly shook us, marking the most challenging realization. "Is there anything, absolutely anything, we can do to support you?" my mother asked, her voice breaking with emotion, yet her gaze remained locked on Frank with unwavering intensity. Frank, with a tender look towards Rose, made a request concerning her future. As he smiled softly at Rose, who attempted to return the gesture despite her tears, we learned of her pregnancy. The news overwhelmed me, triggering an uncontrollable outpouring of tears, accompanied by a sound I scarcely recognized as my own sobs. The room was filled with a heavy sorrow, and even as tears streamed down our faces, my father, voicing the collective concern, inquired if Frank would have the chance to meet his child, even if only briefly. Frank's response was hopeful. He was determined to witness the birth and be present for the initial months of his child's life. Observing Frank and Rose, now managing smiles amidst their tears, I couldn't help but reflect on the depth of their prior conversations and the emotional toll it must have taken, a thought that made me weep anew. The reality of their situation post-birth loomed large, with Frank planning to attend parenting classes to prepare. Given Rose's lack of family support, my parents immediately assured their unwavering assistance. Rose's gratitude was palpable, and Frank's apologies for the upheaval and for not being the son or brother he wished to be under these circumstances were heartfelt. His lament about not being able to share future moments with me, echoing our past exchanges about growing old together, was particularly poignant. Despite the pain, Frank's jest about me drinking on his behalf, coupled with his affectionate gesture of ruffling my hair, underscored the stark reality of his condition. His thin wrist, a visible sign of his fragility, served as a somber reminder of the situation's gravity. This exchange, far from being dismissed as a mere conversation, was a painful acknowledgement of the limited time we had with Frank. In those moments, as Frank continued to comfort me, the sense of familial love and support was overwhelming. The sadness and frustration of the situation brought me to tears once more, yet there was a part of me that found solace in his brotherly care. As Frank and Rose departed, leaving us in a state of concern and reflection, the promise to live each day to the fullest, despite the challenges, remained. Rose's assurance to ensure Frank's well-being echoed our collective desire to support them through this journey. After Frank and Rose departed, we made sure to implore Rose to take exemplary care of Frank. The moment they were out of sight, my mother broke down in inconsolable tears, questioning the fairness of Frank's predicament and mourning the cruel timing of his illness, especially with a baby on the way. Her anguish was unlike anything I had witnessed before, her cries echoing the depth of her despair. "Why him? I would bear this burden in his stead if possible," she lamented, her grief profound. Even my father, who had maintained a veneer of calmness, couldn't hold back his own tears as he joined her in her sorrow. Despite his efforts to stay strong, it was evident he too felt an overwhelming urge to express his pain, having always been deeply devoted to our family. Gathering around my grieving parents, I embraced them, offering what comfort I could. The roles seemed reversed in that moment. The once towering figures of my childhood now appeared vulnerable and in need of support. "We must rally behind Frank and Rose," I declared, amidst our collective tears, urging that we commit wholeheartedly to their support, though unsure of the exact form it should take. This resolve led to a family pact. We would respect their wishes without imposing our own, provide support in whatever manner they deemed necessary, and extend financial help within reasonable means. Our commitment saw us actively participating in their journey, with my mother spending nights with Rose during severe bouts of morning sickness and either my father or I accompanying her to medical appointments. As Rose's pregnancy advanced to the 6-month mark, Frank found solace and strength in bonding with their unborn child. However, a sudden late-night call disrupted our uneasy peace, instantly alerting us to an emergency. With my mother paralyzed by shock, my father took the call, his strained voice signaling distress. As he confirmed our immediate departure to the hospital, the grim reality set in. Frank's condition had deteriorated unexpectedly. Has it worsened so suddenly? We wondered, grappling with the cruel timing, just as Frank was on the brink of fatherhood. Determined to face this ordeal with dignity, I encouraged my distraught parents to prepare to leave, offering to drive for safety. This seemed to galvanize them into action, appreciating my offer of help. We then embarked on the harrowing drive to the hospital, a journey that felt interminably long, each of us silently praying we could make it in time. Upon arrival, we navigated the quiet hospital corridors to Frank's room, a stark, private space where my brother lay, his appearance painfully frail, barely clinging to life. Rose, tears streaming down her face, clutched Frank's hand beside his bed, imploring him to sense the presence of his family gathered around him. "Frank, look, your parents and Charles are all here," she sobbed, mourning the cruel twist of fate that had befallen him. "Frank, you've shown immense courage through this ordeal." My parents took turns comforting him, each expressing their admiration for his bravery in the face of adversity. Meanwhile, I stood immobilized by grief, overwhelmed by the torrent of unsaid words choking my voice, the finality of a farewell too daunting to utter. It was Rose, her strength undiminished despite her tears, who guided me forward. "Charles, it's time to bid Frank farewell," she urged, her resolve steadying me amidst the storm of my emotions. Acknowledging her profound loss, facing the future as a single mother, I found the resolve to approach Frank. With my father making space, I grasped Frank's fragile hand, my voice barely whispering my pride in his valiant fight, my promise to care for Rose and their unborn child. Clenching his hand, I sought to convey my support in his final moments, my tears a testament to our shared grief. Rose, through her sorrow, expressed gratitude for the joy Frank brought into her life, cherishing their brief time together and vowing to ensure their child's happiness. Our collective mourning seemed to grant Frank the peace to depart, his spirit leaving quietly after receiving our farewells. The depth of my grief blurred the subsequent days, leaving me numb until the reality of Frank's absence settled, marked by an altar in our home where we daily honored his memory. Rose, determined to start anew in the home Frank had envisioned for them, respectfully declined our offer to stay with us, choosing instead the solace of their shared dreams. We respected her wish, offering support from afar, reminding her we were just a call away. The impending arrival of their child brought a mix of anticipation and sorrow. When Rose signaled the onset of labor, my mother sprang into action, readiness tinged with the weight of Frank's absence. As they departed for the hospital, I remained, holding vigil at Frank's altar, asking for his blessings on Rose and their baby. The next morning, my mother's call brought news, a beacon of continuity in the legacy Frank left behind. The news of the birth of a beautiful baby girl brought immense joy and relief. Rose, though exhausted, was doing well, prompting tears of joy to stream down my face as I celebrated the wonderful news. Overwhelmed with emotion, I offered my simple but heartfelt congratulations before returning to pray at Frank's altar, sharing the joyous update with my late brother and feeling as if even his photograph shared in our happiness. 2 weeks post-discharge, I visited Rose and the newborn Clara. My mother had once likened the aftermath of childbirth to the aftermath of a car accident, a comparison that filled me with apprehension. Rose, looking fragile yet radiant with her daughter in her arms, thanked me, and I, in turn, urged her to rely on my mother for support, emphasizing the importance of her recovery. Rose graciously acknowledged my mother's help, and I reassured her of her valued place in our family and our gratitude for bringing Clara into our lives. Despite Rose's offer for me to hold Clara, I was overcome with fear at the thought of potentially harming such a fragile life, humorously declining the responsibility to the amusement of the women present. My father empathized with my apprehension, recalling his own fears as a new father, leading me to opt for taking photos instead, capturing the newborn's likeness to Frank, which stirred emotions anew. In the years that followed, Clara grew into a lively 6-year-old, with Rose managing both motherhood and her career commendably. On a whim, I decided to visit without prior notice, pondering the appropriateness of such a surprise. Arriving at the home Frank had built for his family, I was greeted by an eager Clara, despite Rose's cautionary advice. Surprised by my visit, Rose appeared worn yet welcoming. I expressed my concern for her well-being, questioning her self-care routines, and offered to spend time with Clara to provide Rose with a much-needed break, a proposal that caught her off guard. I was careful to approach the conversation with Rose in a manner that wouldn't come across as accusatory. Aware of her tendency to shoulder everything on her own and her difficulty in seeking help, I knew it was vital to avoid any hint of criticism, which would only drive her to isolate herself further. "Could you inform her kindergarten she'll be taking a 3-day break? I've arranged a little getaway for Clara to that theme park she's been eager to visit, including a stay at a hotel for 2 nights. Can you let them know she'll be absent for these days?" I excitedly showed Clara the tickets, adorned with her favorite characters, suggesting, "How about a trip to this park with Uncle Charles?" Clara's excitement was palpable as she agreed, looking forward to the adventure and agreeing that her mom deserved some rest too. While Clara busied herself with picking out a stuffed animal to bring along, it gave me a chance to speak privately with Rose. I shared my observations and concerns about her well-being, mentioning how others had noticed her fatigue and the unexpected suggestion from my mom that I marry her. Rose's surprise mirrored my own initial reaction, but the idea sparked a conversation between us about the possibility, amidst laughter and shared understanding. I confessed to Rose my desire to support her and Clara, suggesting that considering my mom's proposal might not be such a far-fetched idea after all. We acknowledged that, while we knew each other well, there might still be facets of our personalities yet to be discovered. However, starting from a familiar foundation seemed preferable to starting anew with someone else. Rose's reaction, a mix of surprise and emotional vulnerability, underscored the gravity of the proposal for both her and Clara. In a gesture of support, I handed Rose an envelope filled with cash, a gift from my mom intended for her rest and well-being. Rose's tears and the relief that followed hinted at the weight lifted from her shoulders, even if just slightly. The conversation left us both contemplating the future, with the well-being of Rose and Clara at the forefront of our considerations. I'm relieved you were able to express your emotions. Please give some thought to what we discussed, I suggested gently. Rose, having always seen me simply as her brother-in-law, shared a revelation. Frank once advised me to lean on you if anything were to happen, praising your kindness and reliability. It felt overly direct at the time, yet now, it's as if he foresaw this moment, she recounted, her laughter softening the weight of Frank's words. Frank's foresight, though seemingly bold, highlighted his trust in me to look after his family, a responsibility he wouldn't have handed over lightly. My laughter camouflaged the emotion swelling within me, marveling at Frank's insightful nature. As we reminisced, Clara returned, her arms laden with an assortment of plush toys, her choice sparking amusement. Eventually, she agreed to select just one companion for our trip. Over the next 2 days, Clara showcased remarkable independence and boundless energy, reaffirming my admiration for Rose's solo parenting. Let's return to Mom's house, I announced, to Clara's delight. Our return was warmly anticipated by Rose, who greeted us outside their home. Clara's excited recounting of our escapades to her mother was a heartwarming sight, with Rose visibly rejuvenated by our return. Settling back home, Clara transformed my lap into her personal seat, a gesture of affection that brought a smile to all our faces. I'm relieved you were able to express your emotions. Please give some thought to what we discussed, I suggested gently. Rose, having always seen me simply as her brother-in-law, shared a revelation. Frank once advised me to lean on you if anything were to happen, praising your kindness and reliability. It felt overly direct at the time, yet now, it's as if he foresaw this moment, she recounted, her laughter softening the weight of Frank's words. Frank's foresight, though seemingly bold, highlighted his trust in me to look after his family, a responsibility he wouldn't have handed over lightly. My laughter camouflaged the emotion swelling within me, marveling at Frank's insightful nature. As we reminisced, Clara returned, her arms laden with an assortment of plush toys, her choice sparking amusement. Eventually, she agreed to select just one companion for our trip. Over the next 2 days, Clara showcased remarkable independence and boundless energy, reaffirming my admiration for Rose's solo parenting. Let's return to Mom's house, I announced, to Clara's delight. Our return was warmly anticipated by Rose, who greeted us outside their home. Clara's excited recounting of our escapades to her mother was a heartwarming sight, with Rose visibly rejuvenated by our return. Settling back home, Clara transformed my lap into her personal seat, a gesture of affection that brought a smile to all our faces.